everyone. Welcome back to the Backpack Composer. For those of you who are new here, I'm Will. Welcome to my channel. I am very excited about this week's video for a few reasons. One, it's something that I genuinely enjoy doing. I do it in basically every song I produce. Two, it's something that I kept saying I was going to do, and I keep telling people it's possible, and I will sit down to do it in front of a camera and end up talking about something completely different. And three, I got a comment recently. Comment said that that person couldn't do it, which is fine, but I do it all the time. I actually really appreciate comments like, I would never use this thing for that, because it's not that something can't be done. It's just maybe you're thinking of a harder way to do it, and there are always more than one way. And I figured it would be helpful to see how I can write fully orchestrated pieces on the iPad. Today's video is special to me because the first huge gig I ever did was an off-Broadway play, and then I did a few more. Broadway music has always held a very special place in my heart. We've been talking about genre blending, and theatrical music is where you see it done the most. Today's video is how to build fully orchestrated pieces on an iPad. It will actually revisit our ad-libbing and soloing from last week. It will revisit our modal mixture, our chord progressions from the week before. It's going to revisit our drum parts, everything that we have talked about. I will put all of it into practice with detail today. Also, I have been wanting to do a Dolby Atmos release for the longest time, but no matter what I wrote, when I would listen back to it, I'd say, well, this sounds really good in stereo, but I can't imagine how it would sound in surround sound. This week's song is the song. After we get the whole thing mixed, we are going to render it in 5.1 surround sound. We're not doing that on the iPad. We're going to use a web service. As of right now, the iPad does not render into Dolby Atmos, but I have a feeling it's coming soon. So, if there's one genre that really benefits from space and depth that Dolby Atmos would provide, it's definitely orchestral music. We're going to do it just to show that it can be done, and it can be done relatively simply. The song that I'm going to do today took me 3 days to get done. The whole thing was done from the iPad in multiple locations. Actually, the mixing and mastering I'm going to show you was done in the parking lot at my son's wrestling practice. The release from last week, which is now live, go check that out. That was mixed and mastered in the parking lot of my daughter's ballet. Let's dive in. So first things first, let's go over the setup. You've seen pictures of my setup in previous videos. I'm not using the looper. I'm basically just going to use the iPad as my DAW, the MPC Key37 as my sampler, and then clean guitar going into the Fender Bassman, and then into the Allen & Heath CQ12T to record. When I'm talking about all of the equipment I'm going to use, I'm not thinking about recording the song straight out. I actually planned this one out, and I planned it in sections using techniques that I'm familiar with. The iPad doesn't limit the music. It forces discipline. You have to plan for orchestral music. You can't just come in and do it, because it won't work. There's too many variables. Orchestral music in general has been around longer than most. Broadway is based largely in orchestral and gospel music, which is where my foundation is as a musician. Film scores and all that, way back when, before the iPad, before the tablet, it was sit down at a piano, play this out, write it down. Play this out, write it down. Play this out, listen to the whole thing, don't like it, go back and change this. The iPad lets you do that faster. And that's normally the way I'll write. I will do progression first, even if it's on the looper, and then build out from there. Today, instead of the looper, I used pen and paper, I wrote out my chord progression, and then we revisit our secondary dominants and our modal mixture, and we substituted out chords that were held for too long to give the song some motion. And then the iPad, we're going to use the MIDI to trigger the sampler inside of the MPC, and then we will mix and master it as if it was all recorded in one go. So first things first, we need to pick our instruments. I'm thinking electric guitar, acoustic guitar, piano, organ, bass, drums, full strings, and orchestral brass. Not the jazz brass I normally do, flutes, harps, timpani, we're throwing it all. Now that we have our progression and we have our instruments picked out, I always start by getting the chords recorded. The foundation will be bass, just so I know when things change, and then drums. Acoustic guitar is going to follow the drum hi-hat, and then I'm going to re-record a couple of the bass parts to follow the kick, to make the kick sound like it moves. We go back in with our rhythm electric guitar and the piano and the organ. These three define the harmonics of the song. If they're unclear, the orchestra is just going to make it muddier. But if I can get the chordal instruments, i.e. piano, organ, and guitar, the strings have something to follow. For the guitar specifically, when you hear what I did, well over half of what plays back was not what I meant to record. Logic Pro has that new pre-record feature. It just came out in the last update. But what it does is if you hit record, then you hit stop, and then you play the song and play to it, and then hit record again, it will actually record what you played before you hit record, and you can use that take just in case you get it during your rehearsal, but not during the actual session. And I had a bunch of instances where I was practicing scales or trying to figure out riffs to things that I just kept, and they actually came in rather handy at the end. And you'll know when they're there because there'll be nothing, and then there'll be a guitar, and then they'll go back to being nothing again. That's normally when I just dropped it in there to kind of accent what the strings were doing, because this time the strings will be our predominant instrument. This matters because the melody follows exactly what we talked about 2 videos ago when we discussed improvising and ad-libbing. Speaking of melody, the melody was built on one simple rule, and it's the same rule from 3 videos ago: long chord tones, short passing tones, and leading tones. So the chord tones are actually all in D flat major. A lot of my actual chords are variations, inversions, and or secondary dominants of chords, but they all share the same notes. So finding those 7 notes to pick from, it actually all just turned into figuring out what order I wanted to put them in. And that's why I intentionally left that chord track open. It's not there to tell me what to play, it's there to tell me what not to play. I did not use the chord track to do any session players. So all of this is genuinely me, except for 2 parts. There's one sample that I used at the end, and then there was one arpeggiator that I just dragged the chord chart down for, and we did not use Suna. All of this is me playing the same 24 bars 24 times and then just cutting and pasting. The song is almost boring the way it is now because we haven't added the strings yet, and that's where our flavor is. It's essentially just 4 chords, the same progression that we said theatrical music tends to follow in D flat major, the gospel key as they call it, because most of your keys are black. It's hard to make a mistake if you just aim for the black keys. All the color is going to come from those secondary dominants, the counterpoint, which is moving in different directions on different instruments, and the secondary dominants. But at the end of the day, it is just those same 4 chords that we put up when we were talking about theatrical music during our modal mixture discussion. I mean, technically I could call the song done now because we have 2 guitars, a piano, an organ, drums, and bass. But it sounds boring, and it definitely doesn't sound Broadway-esque. So this is when we start adding in the strings. For string parts, I did not do anything I had not done before. What I did was I recorded the piano part via MIDI 2 more times. So 1 verse, 1 pre-chorus, 1 chorus, twice. And then I deleted the instrument I used to make them, so it just kept the MIDI notes. And then I send 1 MIDI program to my sampler at a time, and then I record the sampler in stereo. And I just kept doing this over and over and over and over. And every time I would do it, pick a different patch. So the first patch was just strings. The next patch was wet strings. The next patch was stereo big strings. The next patch was wet horns, then dry horns, then solo horns, then strings and horns. And we would just keep doing this. And every time we would send the MIDI signal, we would take something out so that not everything is doing the same thing every time. There will always be some slight change so that it doesn't compete with itself. This is the same way we would use our looper. That's where the concept comes from. For a looper, you play the thing, and then while the thing is playing back, you play another thing. And then while those 2 things are playing back, you play a third thing. And after enough things, you've got a full song going that you can now play over. We're systematically picking and choosing which patches sound realistic together. I need to pause to let you know, if you don't have a sampler, there is a sampler built in to Logic Pro. The Alchemy sampler, if you have a Splice account, which I showed during my Better Drums for iPad video, you can pick string samples there, and then you drag and drop them into sampler, and then you would just play the iPad using the piano track, and there are your samples. Or Logic Pro, it actually comes with a decent sample library. I wasn't impressed with the string samples myself, but they were the free ones. For my $20 a month for Splice, the string samples were much better, even though I didn't use them. But I did check they were there for the non-keyboard players. You want to be careful when 2 timbres play the same thing at the same time. Every take, as I said, I would pull a little bit out so that there's no 2 notes playing at the same time, and there's no 2 rhythms at the same time. I would swap things in and out. I would shuffle them around depending on what the melody was doing. And when the melody needs clarity, I lean into the dry signals. That's why I had 2 sets, a dry set and a wet set. And when it needs more space, that's when I bring in the wet version. Reverb is your friend when it comes to strings. Like, reverb will make your strings sound better. Strings naturally, they live in an overlapping frequency range. So reverb smooths out some of those competing frequency, and it softens bow noises. If your samples are super high definition, you can hear where something is a little harsh. So I used the reverb to smooth that out, or take out sections altogether if I needed to. That's how I recorded all of the strings. But for the strings effects chains, while I had a wet set going in and a dry set going in, I did not just leave them untouched. The solo strings got some light shaping, gentle dynamic control, and a little bit of reverb just for expressive purposes. The sections got more smoothing, and I left them untouched for the most part, but I increased the mids and gave them a little bit of reverb, and I messed with the compressor a little bit. Pads, I took the bass out of all of them just so everything is sitting on top of them, but it's not forward in the mix. All the pads are low. And by pads, I didn't use actual pads. It was a string section sample where they're actually just long sustained notes. They're there just to kind of fill in the gaps, but not necessarily be listened to. All of it routes to a string bus, and then the solo ones are going to the bus as well as to the stereo out for when I need them to kind of pop. So now my horns. My horn section, I've been really into horns lately. My past 2 or 3 albums have been very horn-centered. The horn section I actually played myself, and I did that in the same way I would an organ, except no left hand and no sustained notes. So whenever I heard a gap, fill it with a run on the chords or single notes, and I would use the organ swell pedal to do brass swells. Basically, I did 3 piano parts, 2 of which were designated for strings, and I did 2 organ parts, 1 for the actual organ and then 1 for the brass. I kept it really simple for the horns. 3 notes, no more than 3 notes ever playing at a time. The instruments might change, but it's still no more than 3 notes at a time. Long attacks, swell, lots of comping, and it's just there to kind of give some color in terms of composition. So the strings by themselves behind the foundation we recorded would have worked, but those horns coming in and out brings the song to life because it's not expected. So now we go next. We go in and we record our melody. I had already figured it out. I was up at 3 a.m. with an acoustic guitar just tinkering, and I finally got it. So I recorded 1 verse, I recorded 1 pre-chorus, I recorded 1 chorus, copied it, then I did a solo section, and then I got rid of the stuff that was just competing with the strings, and then re-recorded some of what was left. I didn't video all of the takes, because that would be an hour-long video by itself, but basically that's where our melody came from. It's just 1 guitar doing the same thing, just like we did for our piano, like we talked about for our ad-libbing video. What you'll do is you'll record the same one thing 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and then cut and paste the parts you like together into one master take, and then you can either re-record that, or you can just merge it. What I did was merged it, and then copied that, panned 1 all the way to the right with reverb, and then 1 all the way to the left with delay. And so when you hear it in your headphones, you're hearing the same melody in the middle, but the color on the side of it is different. It's an acoustic guitar trick I talked about a couple videos ago, but since the acoustic guitar here is mainly just there to add that pick sound, I used it on the melody instead with all the strings going behind it. So with that, you can see the iPad does do orchestral music. What you're hearing, it's a live performance with strings, horns, piano, dynamics. I actually recorded this voiceover after spending days working on it. The iPad had no issues. Even while I was screen recording, like most of the time it'll try to shut itself off if I'm multi-track recording and screen recording. But this time it was fine. Now that this is done, we're going to upload it into our Dolby Atmos converter. And we are going to pay them their $10 per song, and then pay my distributor their $40 per Dolby upload. And now, this should be available within the hour. Let me know what you think. your gear be light, your latency low, and your dogs quiet while you track vocals. I'll see you next time.